Okay, we're back in the saddle here. So we're going to be passing a series of side streets here as we make our way along Empire Avenue. Again, you can see the width of the road here, right? You can see the depth of people's front yards and then how wide the road is, again indicating that there was something here, right? Normally these types of streets are not that wide, right? I mean, if we pass, so we're passing Mortimer here, you can basically see a typical street like this. You can see how much narrower. It is much colder today. It's supposed to get up around 5, 6, 7 degrees today, but riding, there's a pretty stiff wind, probably here on the camera, and it's cold. Wind is chilly. Again, we've had a very unusual winter. The last 2 years, we got a ton of snow in March and April. Fingers crossed that's not going to happen this year. But we didn't get very much snow, and it's been unusually warm. So you can see all the snow is pretty much gone. You can see some here on the sheltered side, on the north side of some of the homes. Okay, so I'm going to pass one more side street here, Lily, and then we've got a major road here. In typical Thunder Bay fashion, the road changes its name. There's a bend in the road, and that part of the bend is Ford Street, and this side is Kingsway Avenue. I don't know if that happens in other cities and towns, but happens a lot in our city. Lots of name changes. See my breath. It's my first time out on the bike this year, so I'm huffing and puffing a little bit. Gotta go take it in for a tune-up. Okay, so we're coming to our next major feature here. And so basically right up here is the modern Canadian National Rail line, the Kashabawi subdivision. And so just to kind of give you a little background on this, so let's check first of all where we are in terms of our mileage here. So where this line crossed the Canadian National line, or the Canadian Northern line originally, was at milepost 1.4. So there was an interlock here. All right, so there's lots going on in this spot right here. So originally the rail line used to run straight through here. So in here, just right across from us here, is a City of Thunder Bay works yard. But the line used to come right across here. So maybe if we kind of go up here, you can kind of see where the rail line comes through. So that's part of the rail line right there, and so you can see it coming through here, and so it would have cut straight through this area right about here somewhere. So this rail bed here actually is very, very old, and again, we're going to be talking about it. It wasn't this elevated, so you got to imagine it's much lower than it is right now. So this rail bed actually dates back to the 1870s. So when the Canadian Pacific Railway was constructed, or construction started on the Canadian Pacific between Fort William and Winnipeg in 1875, there was no connection to the nearby city of Port Arthur. So I believe the year was 1876. The people of Port Arthur built a railway line from their community to the Canadian Pacific line, which kind of terminated just up here, and it was known as the Prince Arthur's Landing and Kaministiquia Railway, so the PAL&K. And so it would have come through right through here into that direction over there and linked up with the Canadian Pacific. Now eventually the Canadian Pacific was extended into Port Arthur, and so this rail line was abandoned. Now it was brought back to life in the late 1880s and early 1890s when the Port Arthur Duluth and Western Railway was constructed. So originally the Port Arthur Duluth and Western was supposed to run from Port Arthur kind of more to the west towards Murillo, but they decided to bring the line through Fort William and through westward. And so what they did was they used the grade of the old Prince Arthur's Landing in Kaministiquia and basically ran it right through this area. And so when the Port Arthur Duluth and Western was taken over by Canadian Northern, it became part of the Canadian Northern line. And so that's why you end up with basically this interlock, this intersection here between the Grand Trunk line that was coming through here and the Canadian Northern line that was running through the area. And so again, we're not quite sure exactly when this branch line down Empire Avenue was opened, but it was used up until 1921. Now, something interesting kind of happened. So in 1921, they stopped running trains to the station. So this eastern part of this branch was eliminated, but the western part continued to be used. And so what they did was basically they started using all of the Canadian Northern facilities, right? So the Canadian Northern station was just up that way. They actually built a little bit of a loop line that brought it more through into the city of Fort William. And so from 1921 to 1925, this was part of the Grand Trunk line. So the trains used to come down from the station, and the Canadian some of the trains would use the old Canadian Northern line running through town, hooking up with the Kashibawi subdivision, but the trains going out on the Grand Trunk line would come here and cut off and go that way. It became more pronounced in 1924 and 1925 when the line became the Crest Subdivision. So this particular point here became known as Midway, right? Because I guess it was sort of midway part of the line here. Now, I don't have an exact date, but I think it was in the 1950s that they basically disconnected this line here. But this part here, I'm pretty sure it was in the 1930s that CN began using this as part of their main line through the city, right? So what they did was they basically stopped really using this section and then essentially hooked in with the former Grand Trunk line that was running through here and basically continued it to the west. And when we get to Empire Junction, we're going to be kind of seeing how that all kind of came together. And then afterwards, in a different video, we're going to be following the line west from Empire Junction. Now, I don't know how this all sort of fit together. If when CN sort of rejiggled this, they put in a separate line beside this one, and maybe this was kind of the point where they sort of came together. I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, a lot of the traces of the railway line are gone. So once we get up to the next street here, which is Edward Street, you can see things a little bit better. Okay, so I'm gonna zip you ahead a little bit. coming up here on Edward Street, and you can see the tracks beside us here. So we're going to make our way across. Just reading what that sign said. Make our way across here. So here you can get a better view of the line. You can see the modern little switching boxes here, equipment boxes for the Kashabawi subdivision. And so for a long time, when CN basically built this, you know, after all the amalgamations and stuff, there used to be a double track, and that was ripped up, I don't know, probably about 20 years ago or so. At one point there used to be 4 CN lines coming into the city, the North Lake, Kashabawi, Graham, via the Kashabawi and the Kinghorn, and now there's one, the Kashabawi. So they didn't need that extra track, so they pulled it out. So again, I don't know if this is the original grade, or you know, it was a little bit more over here, or what the situation was. There's probably a good chance that that was the original grade of the of this Empire Avenue line, because when it gets to the end, when it gets to Empire Junction, which we're going to, it makes this little jog, which it still does today. Okay, let's hold up here for a second.